In rural Kentucky, a young African-American boy named Carl Brashear grows up working on a farm with his family. His father, Mac Brashear, is a sharecropper who wakes before dawn and plows fields in the hot sun. Carl often watches his father laboring in the fields and offers to help, but Mac refuses. He tells Carl he wants a better life for him, one that doesn't involve the soil or a plow. He urges Carl to stay in school, study hard, and leave the farm for good. Carl listens. He continues with his schooling, but he never forgets his father's words. The only thing Mac gives him before Carl leaves home is a small, rechargeable radio. As Carl boards the bus, his father makes him promise never to come back to the farm. He tells Carl that success will only come if he fully leaves this life behind. Carl agrees. His journey begins. In 1948, Carl enlists in the United States Navy, but as a black man in post-war America, Carl is not allowed to serve in combat or specialized roles. He is assigned to work in the galley aboard the salvaged ship USS Hoist. His job is to cook and clean. Even among the other black sailors, segregation is strict. Carl and the others are not permitted to swim at the same time as the white sailors. One day, while watching the white trainees swimming from the deck, Carl questions the rules. He asks why they must swim separately, even though they all wear the same uniform. No one answers. Carl removes his shoes, steps past the barrier, and dives into the water. The white sailors are stunned. Carl swims toward a buoy far in the distance. One of the instructors orders a swimmer to catch him, but Carl moves quickly and outpaces them. He reaches the buoy first. The white officers are furious. He has broken protocol. Carl is thrown into the brig, but later, the ship's captain reviews Carl's record and learns that he clocked the fastest swim time on the entire ship. Impressed by his strength and determination, the captain assigns Carl to the rescue swimmer team, the first black sailor in that position on the hoist. That night, Carl writes a letter home, proud to tell his parents that he is finally making progress. Sometime later, a helicopter transporting Navy mail crashes into the sea. The captain calls for the ship's master diver, Chief Petty Officer Billy Sunday, to lead the rescue. Wearing a standard Mark V deep-sea diving suit that weighs over 200 kilograms, Billy descends to recover the bodies. He manages to retrieve one of the downed pilots, but the pilot does not survive. A second diver is sent down to recover the co-pilot, but during the dive, the safety cable snaps. The diver plummets toward the bottom of the ocean. Without hesitation, Billy Sunday jumps in without a suit to attempt a free dive and rescue his comrade. Both men are saved, but the effort severely damages Sunday's lungs. He is hospitalized. Doctors inform him that he has suffered a major embolism and will never be allowed to dive again. Billy lashes out in frustration, destroying equipment and fighting staff in the hospital. As a result, he is brought before a disciplinary board. During the trial, Carl is present among the sailors in the courtroom. The board rules that Billy is to be demoted and reassigned to shore duty. He is no longer allowed to dive. His new posting will be at the Navy Diving and Salvage Training School in Bayonne, New Jersey, as an instructor. After the hearing, Carl approaches the captain and asks to join the Navy's diving program. Inspired by Billy's bravery during the rescue, Carl tells him that he wants to save lives the way Billy did. The captain is skeptical at first, but sees Carl's sincerity. He agrees to support his request and submits the transfer. Carl is eventually ordered to report to the Bayonne school. When he arrives at the gate, the guards hesitate. They have never seen a black man apply for diver training. They inform him that no such candidates have ever been admitted. Carl presents his orders and waits outside the gate for hours. Later that evening, Billy Sunday arrives. He sees Carl still standing outside and asks what he's doing there. Carl tells him that he's here to train, that he's going to become a Navy diver. Billy scoffs. He says the diving school is no place for someone like Carl. He tells him he should go back to the galley. Carl refuses to leave. He reminds Billy of his promise to his father, that he would never return to the farm and that he would not quit. Billy finally gives in and allows him through the gate. Carl is assigned to the barracks with the other diving candidates. Most of them are white. As news of Carl's admission spreads, tension builds. One of the trainees, Snowhill, is the only one who welcomes Carl with a handshake. He introduces himself and offers to show Carl around. Snowhill explains that the camp is overseen by the strict commanding officer, Captain Mr. Pappy, and that the head instructor is none other than Chief Petty Officer Billy Sunday. Later that evening, Billy enters the barracks. He introduces Carl as a new candidate and makes no effort to hide his contempt. One by one, The other trainees pack their belongings and leave the room, refusing to share quarters with a black man. By the end of the night, only Carl and Snow Hill remain. That night, Billy storms into the room. He throws a bucket of cold water on Carl and drags him outside. He accuses Carl of ruining his name by just being there. Billy then sprays Carl with a high-pressure hose and forces him to recite basic diving principles. When Carl hesitates on an answer, Billy shoves him into the water and leaves him soaked and shivering. Carl says nothing. The next morning, the first day of training begins. Billy addresses the group. He tells them that many will fail, that swimming and diving are not the same. He warns them that pressure, darkness, and fear will break most of them. Billy calls Snow Hill forward first, challenging his claim of being a strong swimmer. Snow Hill struggles to complete the breathing test. Billy marks him as failed and immediately dismisses him from the program. The rest of the trainees begin daily physical and academic training. Carl performs well in the physical tasks, but during the written exams, he falls short. He has difficulty with diving theory, engineering, and science, subjects he never studied growing up. The instructors warn him that if he fails another test, he'll be dismissed. Instead of taking liberty during his free hours, Carl visits the local public library. There, he meets a young woman named Jo, a nursing student who works part-time as a librarian. Carl asks for her help with studying. She's hesitant at first, warning him that it will take months to learn the material. Carl insists. Moved by his determination, Jo agrees to help him. Back at the base, training continues. During an underwater welding exercise, two trainees, Rourke and Izard, descend to repair the hull of a sunken vessel. Suddenly, the ship shifts, causing equipment to jam and Izard's air hose to become entangled. Rourke panics and abandons the dive, swimming back to the surface. Carl volunteers to rescue Izard. With no other options, Billy gives him 5 minutes to reach the trapped diver. Carl descends and works quickly to free Izard's hose and stabilize his oxygen flow. He succeeds and brings Izard safely back to the surface. Later, during the morning assembly, Billy reads out a Navy commendation for bravery, but the medal is awarded to Rourke, not Carl. Mr. Pappy watches from above, ensuring that the act of heroism remains unacknowledged. Carl remains quiet. The other trainees begin to notice. One by one, their attitudes toward Carl start to change. That evening, Carl calls home to speak with his family. His mother informs him that his father has passed away. She tells Carl that Mac had been ill for some time, but didn't want Carl to know. He wanted Carl to stay focused on his training. Carl is devastated. After the call, he sits alone in silence. He calls Jo and asks her to meet him. They go to a bar in town, but Jo doesn't stay long. Shortly after she leaves, Gwen Sunday, Billy's wife, arrives unexpectedly. She tells Carl that it's her wedding anniversary, but Billy is out drinking with the officers. She says she came to see what kind of man her husband hates so much. Carl and Gwen talk for a while and share a drink. Inside the bar, Billy sees them together and becomes enraged. He confronts Carl and accuses him of crossing a line. Carl stands up for himself. He says Billy isn't angry because Carl's black. He's angry because Carl is better than he is. Billy challenges Carl to a breath-holding contest using the dive suits. The terms are simple. If Carl loses, he will leave the training program. If he wins, Snow Hill will be reinstated. The suits are filled with water. Both men sit submerged, holding their breath. Time passes. At 4 minutes, Billy begins to bleed from the nose. His body starts to give out. Snow Hill and the others pull the helmet off. Carl wins. Jo, who had returned to the bar and witnessed the event, walks out. Carl follows her. She tells him she's moving away for a new job. Carl, desperate not to lose her, proposes on the spot. He promises to find her after graduation. Jo doesn't answer, but she hugs him and leaves. The next day, Billy is called to meet with Mr. Pappy. Pappy tells him directly that he does not want a black man to graduate from the diving program. He orders Billy to fail Carl in the final exam. Billy doesn't respond, but he understands the consequences if he disobeys. That night, Billy visits Carl's bunk. He informs Carl that he's under orders to make him fail. Carl doesn't back down. The two argue. In anger, Billy grabs Carl's radio, the one given to him by his father, and smashes it on the floor. Carl is stunned, but says nothing. The final exam is scheduled for the next morning. The next morning, the diving candidates report to the dock for the final test. Each student is required to perform a deep-sea repair operation. They must descend, retrieve a bag of tools, and assemble a pipe flange on the seabed, all while wearing a standard Mark V diving suit. Carl arrives late, but composed. The other trainees glance at him with silent respect. Billy sees him approach and says nothing. Mr. Pappy watches from the observation tower, waiting. As each trainee descends, their equipment bags are lowered with them. When it's Carl's turn, Pappy orders the crew to sabotage his bag. The sack is slid open before hitting the water. Tools scatter across the ocean floor. Carl reaches the bottom and quickly realizes what's happened. Unlike the others, he has to locate every component by hand in near-zero visibility. One by one, the other candidates surface, each completing the task. Carl remains underwater, working silently in the cold and darkness. Hours pass. Billy receives a radio call from Pappy, instructing him to end Carl's dive. Billy hesitates. Pappy reminds him of the consequences. Still, Billy refuses to give the order. On the surface, Jo arrives. She stands among the instructors and trainees, anxiously watching the water. Billy paces in silence. 10 hours pass. Finally, Carl emerges, exhausted, soaked, and barely able to stand, but he's completed the task. His flange is perfectly assembled. The instructors say nothing at first. Then one of them nods. Carl has passed. The next day, at the graduation ceremony, Carl stands among his fellow trainees. He is the first Black man to graduate from the Navy's diving program. The other students shake his hand. Snowhill, who was reinstated after Carl's challenge, congratulates him. The applause is quiet but genuine. Billy is not present. Snowhill pulls Carl aside and informs him that Chief Sunday has been dismissed from the program. Pappy filed charges against him for insubordination. Carl doesn't say anything. Later, back at the barracks, he finds something sitting on his bunk. His father's radio. It has been repaired. Billy left it for him. Years pass. Carl rises through the ranks, becoming one of the Navy's most skilled divers. He marries Jo, and they have a son. In 1966, Carl is selected for a top-secret recovery mission off the coast of Spain, the Palomares incident. A US B-52 bomber has crashed midair with a tanker aircraft, releasing a hydrogen bomb into the ocean. The Navy is tasked with finding and retrieving the device before Soviet submarines can reach it. Carl descends into the deep, leading the recovery operation. He locates the bomb buried beneath the seabed. As the crew begins to hoist the device to the surface, a support beam snaps. Carl pushes a fellow diver out of the way and is struck by a falling metal frame. His leg is crushed. He is rushed to the hospital. When he wakes up, Jo is at his side. Doctors tell Carl that his leg is too damaged. He will never walk normally again. They recommend medical retirement. Carl is devastated. He stares at the ceiling, silent. Jo tries to comfort him, but he feels broken. He has lost not just his leg, but the career he worked a lifetime to build. Elsewhere, Billy Sunday now lives in obscurity. No longer in the Navy, he spent his days drinking. When he reads about Carl's accident in the newspaper, something shifts in him. Despite everything, Carl was the one trainee who never gave up. Billy feels compelled to act. He visits Carl in the hospital. Carl is barely responsive. Billy looks around the room and realizes Carl has been abandoned by the same institution he gave everything to. Later, Carl petitions the Navy to return to active duty as a diver. He explains that with a prosthetic, he can still serve, but Navy officials reject the request. Captain Hanks, now in charge of diving certification, personally denies Carl's reinstatement. Carl refuses to accept it. He demands a hearing and requests a physical test to prove his ability. Jo is furious. She confronts Carl and begs him to think of his family, of their son. But Carl stands firm. He tells her he has to finish what he started. Jo leaves the room in tears. With Billy's help, Carl begins training again. He learns to walk with the prosthetic, then to run. Billy coaches him the way he once did at dive school, with no sympathy and no shortcuts. For weeks pass. The hearing is scheduled. The day of the Navy Personnel Review Board hearing arrives. Carl reports in uniform, standing tall on one leg and a steel prosthesis. The room is filled with officers, doctors, and administrators. Captain Hanks presides over the panel. Carl answers their questions calmly and clearly. He states his intention to return to full active diving duty. The board listens but remains skeptical. Captain Hanks announces a final requirement. Anyone seeking certification to dive using the new mixed gas rig must be able to walk 12 steps on land while wearing the full Mark V suit, a rig that weighs nearly 290 pounds. No exceptions. Carl accepts without hesitation. He volunteers to take the test immediately. The rig is brought in. The officers look on in silence as Carl is helped into the heavy suit. The crowd shifts nervously. Many doubt it's possible. Carl's prosthetic leg locks in place. Sweat forms on his face as the weight presses down. Billy Sunday appears at the entrance, but is stopped by security. He pushes his way through. The guards try to restrain him, but a high-ranking officer recognizes him and allows him in. Billy takes his place near Carl and stands at attention. Joe and their son arrive quietly and stand in the back of the room. Carl sees them. He straightens his posture and looks forward. Captain Hanks tells Carl to begin. Step by step, Carl moves forward. 1, 2, 3. Each movement is slow, deliberate, and painful. By the 6th step, Carl's leg begins to shake. He loses balance but recovers. Hanks orders the test to stop, declaring it unsafe. Billy speaks up. He reminds the panel that Carl is under his instruction. He orders Carl to continue. 7, 8, 9. Billy raises his voice. Move your ass, Cookie. I want my 12, 10, 11, 12. Carl completes the walk and stops. The room falls silent. Captain Hanks stares at him, then slowly announces that Carl Brashear is reinstated to full active duty as a U.S. Navy diver. The audience rises in applause. Officers, sailors, and even skeptics acknowledge the moment. Carl stands silently in his gear, the weight of history now behind him. Billy steps forward. He salutes Carl, a final gesture of respect. Then he turns and quietly exits the room. His role as teacher and rival is complete. 2 years later, Carl Brashear is officially promoted to Master Diver, the highest enlisted rank in the Navy diving program. He is the first Black man in history to achieve the title. Carl continues to serve for another 9 years before retiring. His legacy lives on, not only as a Navy legend, but as proof that no barrier is insurmountable when matched with courage, honor, and the refusal to quit.